300 vlogs, baby. Spartans! It is so good to be here. It may not be the best stretch of poker I've ever had, and that is putting it mildly. But to do the 300th vlog, and there's a comment about that I'm going to read at the end of the vlog, is truly an amazing feeling, and I cannot express my gratitude enough for those of you who have been with me since the start. This vlog started in March of 2018, and at that point, I hadn't really even figured out the proper way to do the vlog. If you watch the early ones, obviously they look a lot different in a number of ways. I was even still a morning show reporter at that time, and a lot of other things about my life were a lot different, as you know. And then the vlog just kind of evolved over the years into what it is now, and I very much like what it is now. But just to get to this point is not necessarily something I ever thought that I would do. So I'm only here because you guys are watching, and I can't express how appreciative I am of that. As for poker, well, if you're watching this, then there is a 100% chance that you have played a hand of poker that you're still thinking about one day later. And that is the case with me. It was a combination of me being incredibly pissed off at myself for what I ended up doing in the hand. And part of me said, you called nearly $500 before the flop with that? Did that really just happen? You'll hear about that at the end of vlog 300. Vlog 300 is coming your way from Peppermill, Reno, a place where some people drive electric cars and others drive smart cars, a place where some ride in regular limos and others use SUV limos, and a place where you can open this door to find Kayla practicing her DJ skills. Okay, I guess that was actually at Bugsy's studio in Sparks, not the Peppermill, but come on, just go with it. I'd get into the room at 10:45 a.m. to find the game starting on table 5. After playing straight 5-10 the day before, we were back to 0-5-10 with the winner's straddle as indicated by the rock. Mr. W and Slick were in the game just like last week, with the other 6 opponents I think all being different but still regulars. The first hand would come when Mr. W is under the gun with the rock. I have pocket queens in the cutoff and raised to 30. Big blind calls, and the straddle completes. So at 90 in the pot, the flop would come out deuce, deuce 7 rainbow, and it gets checked to me. I bet 50. Big blind calls, and Mr. W goes out under the gun. So with 190 in the pot, the turn is a 4, and he checks. I look to get a little sneaky here and check this back, partially because I think he's going to have some deuces here, and partially because I think he's going to be calling just insanely light on the flop and would just fold to a lot of turn bets here. The river rolls off the 6 of clubs, and now he leads out, but not for an amount that you could even consider folding. He just bets 60, so it's an easy call, creating a $310 pot, and he says, good call, ace high, showing ace 9, and I would get on the board early. We get an early position raise to 30, and I look down at pocket aces. Middle position 2 and make it 125. Folds around and he calls. So with 265 in, we would head to the flop. Now, I would just like to say there are some situations where you would not mind an ace-high flop when you have pocket aces, and others where it's just an action killer. Over the course of this particular video, you'll get to see me get those 2 situations exactly backwards as I further tease ahead. Anyway, despite me slow playing the flop, my turn bet would get a quick fold. Another good time to get ace-high boards when you have pocket aces is when you get $2,000 in before the flop. Something Slick would accomplish here, doubling up early on the day. It would ultimately be the single most impactful thing to happen to the game throughout the entire 8 hours I was there, because when Slick gets up big, he often goes on lockdown. And that was the case on this day for sure.
See, every time Ben races, I'm just going to fold. Just to teach him a lesson.
I'm a slow learner. We get a $35 open middle position 1. Folds to me in the hijack with 10s, and I 3-bet it to 125. Folds back to the original raiser, a very tough opponent. One who rarely gives me any action in spots like this, but this time he does defend. So with 265 in, the flop is 3, 5, 7, 2 diamonds, and he checks. In an effort to induce a turn bet out of a weaker hand, I simply check this back. Spoiler alert, my plan would work. Turn is the 3 of spades. He fires 150 here. I'd find myself wondering how often he'd be bluffing the river, because he could still have queens or jacks here and simply be value betting, but it's certainly a call that I'm going to make. The river card comes out, he checks, and I simply check it back, and he says, ace high. So I table my tens and win the pot. So it felt good to win that one. It also felt good to see Riley Smith coming back to my Golden Knights as the news would break during the session. One of the franchise's greatest players throughout its short history. I'd lose back $100 in a bomb pot when the game's only OMC would check raise all in for $1,000 more over my $75 bet, which I thought was hilarious. Cutoff limps, and I have 2 black aces on the button and make it 40. Folds back around, and it's a limp call situation. So with 95 in, the flop is jack, 7 deuce, rainbow, and I bet 50. And after just a few seconds, I get check called. And with 195 in, the turn pairs the jack, and now he bets out for 150. I should have just folded this hand right here. It's the worst turn card in the deck, there's no question about that. But I didn't. And with 495 in, I would really hope to not face a big bet on the river. And in typical 2025 fashion, I get exactly what I'm hoping does not happen. I would fold the aces and move on. A hand that I'm typically very happy to get, but on the course of this vlog, maybe not so much. Both name-offs would sit down in the game. The elder of which has run as good against me as just about any player over the past 2 years. Apparently Crazy Joe wasn't a soccer player, by the way. Brian apparently got his ability from his mom. Also, SVA would knock over Brian's stack and reassemble it. Like this. Anyway, I thought I might get into an interesting hand against the father-son pairing here, but after I called a raise with 6, 7 of hearts, it just checked all the way around 3 straight times, and my pair of 7s ended up being good. I would then nail a Wordle in 3 guesses, though I really thought I might have a chance to get it in 2 there. I actually went into this day thinking that it would be appropriate to get dealt my favorite hand, pocket 8s, on my 300th vlog, but apparently I didn't think it would be appropriate to get called when I raised with them. I would then call a very small 3-bet with ace-king from the younger name-off. It would check down the entire way on a 9-high board, which I actually thought meant my ace-king was going to be good at least for half the pot, but it wasn't, as he'd table jacks. The very next hand, I would open pocket queens to 35, and the aforementioned Crazy Joe would 3-bet me, making it 100 from the cutoff. There are not going to be too many hands that I'm going to be giving action to him with in this spot, but this is certainly one of them. So with 210 in the pot, the flop comes out 9, 3, 4 rainbow, and I check. He bets 125, and I just don't see how I can go out here with pocket queens. So with 460 in, the turn pairs the 9, then I check again. Once again, he bets, and once again, he bets 125. At this point, I just really think that he has aces or kings here. I think he's checking back jacks. Maybe the occasional ace-king bluff, but for the most part, I'd say that's rare. So I should just fold this hand here. Should. But don't. And with 710 in, the river is the 6 of spades, and for a third time, I check. He immediately checks back, which gave me a glimmer of hope that I might be good here up until he rolls over pocket kings, and I would lose because, well, of course he does. The last few hours of the session were once again the most miserable. There was a lot of flopping top pair and being outkicked, a costly straight flush draw that bricked out in a 3-way pot, which could have potentially been a big one, and then a lot of times getting dealt pocket 9s that led to a couple of $300 pots being lost. And then at 6:30, the game would break. There had been 2 games going on that were both full at like 3 o'clock, and before 7 on this Thursday night, both of these games would break. Didn't matter to me, because I was quitting anyway, booking the loss. All right, wrapping up the session. Actually, the game just broke. It's about 7 o'clock. Booking a $372 loss. Things started out pretty decently. I think I said this exact same thing last week. If I had just quit several hours earlier, My entire plan has been to play shorter sessions. But once again, I fell into the trap of wanting to do a better vlog and stay to collect more material. And then I end up running pocket aces into what I assume was trip jacks. And of course, Crazy Joe is Crazy Joe, and he's always just going to cooler me in whatever spots he needs. In this case, kings against queens. And so, 2025 continues for me. All right, we'll get to some viewer comments here in a minute as our giveaway continues. But first, I want to mention the hand that I referenced off the top of the vlog. The hand comes when I look down at pocket aces in the under the gun +1 position, playing straight 5-10 in this one, no rock, which has been happening on occasion. And I make it 40. Folds to the cutoff, who 3-bets to 125 here. Obviously, music to my ears. And it folds back around to me. I am beating the game at this point for just about $1,000. So I have $2,000 in play, and he has me covered. And I 4-bet him to $475. And I do this fully aware that this is not an opponent that loves it when he hands his cards back to the dealer. Like, that motion is not his favorite one to make. And that's part of the reason why I figured $475 was a pretty good amount, because I thought he might call me with a lot of hands here, but I really just assumed that he was going to fold. I really, at the end of the day, unless he has a very strong hand, I expect him to muck this. He thinks about it for about 30 seconds and calls. So with $965 in the pot, the flop is Queen 10-8 with 2 clubs and 1 spade. Exactly the kind of flop I was hoping not to see, because these are all around the area in terms of the sets that I would think he might have. But that said, I'm obviously still going to bet here. I make it 400, a little under half the pot, and he proceeds to snap call. So with 1,750 in the pot, the turn is an offsuit king. Against the majority of the opponents that I play with in this 5-10 game, I am definitely going to have to worry about them taking this exact line against me with pocket kings. I know this is not one of those opponents, but I decided to slow down here and see how this hand would develop, and I just check. Now, I think I said I started the hand with 2,000. I actually started the hand with about 2,300. Now that I think back on this, I had about $1,250 in my stack, and he proceeds to bet it all. Now, my gut the entire time this was going on was that he was putting me on exactly the hand that I had. It just seemed so obvious. So the thought that he would try to just get me to fold it seemed insane. And I just had to assume that he had it beat. I knew that it was possible that he's not just going to have sets here. And I assumed that if he was doing this with a flush draw, it would mean that he also had a pair of kings to go along with it. And how did I do last week when I took my overpair up against a pair and a flush draw? Not so well. So those are things I was considering. When he smooth called the flop, I was definitely worried that he'd flopped a set and would just slow play it and want me to continue blasting into him, which makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. So I continued to give this some thought, thinking back to commenters, not that I base my play on them, but thinking back to some commenters that made a good point last week. It's like, don't get married to those overpairs. You often lose massive pots when you do. So I just decided to give this hand up. I was amazed he called pre-flop in the first place, but once he did, and once I got this exact crappy run out, I just did not feel good about it. So I just folded the pocket aces, not expecting to ever find out what he had. And then in a moment where I don't think I've ever seen an opponent happier, he rolls over ace 9 of spades for obviously a ridiculous play, but one that happened to work out for him. I often tell myself, and I'm sure some of you do this too, in big hands, it's like, God damn it. This guy is just going to do the thing where he knows I don't want to play for my whole stack, and he's just going to call me in position with anything and just represent whatever's out there. I've thought that to myself so many times, and it's just never the case. They always just have the nuts. In this case, it was actually happening. I actually had a guy that's just like, I'm just going to call Ben with anything and just represent whatever he doesn't want to see. And credit to him. You know, he's not a grinder. I will say that about him. He's a tough poker player to beat, but he's a gambler too. And he proved it in this spot. And I, apparently, am a complete idiot and lay that hand down in a hand that could have really put a dent in turning this year around for me. I completely fuck the hand up and make one of the stupidest plays that I can remember making in some time in one of the most shocking hands that I've played in quite a while. All right, so again, the giveaway is a Peppermill coin that is 99.9% pure silver. If you live outside of the United States, you're going to have to pay for shipping, and you must be subscribed to this channel and following me on Instagram at bendeach to qualify to win. But that's it. Best comment is going to take it over the course of the next couple of weeks. Let's get a couple more nominees. LOP MiG11 for the best comment giveaway. Once I win that coin, I'm going to use it as a card protector. That 99.9% silver should generate 99.9% pots shipped my way. I predict you'll have a very good win rate if that's the case. David Weaver writes in, when I'm in the middle of a brutal downswing, it helps me to recall what Third Man Walking's Charlie Wilmot said during one of his. Your role as a professional poker player, or really any kind of poker player, is sometimes to take variance so someone else can have success. This too shall pass. First of all, I absolutely love Charlie Wilmot on his podcast. He has a great delivery. He keeps the podcast tight, and there's really a lot to take out of it. One of the great Crush Live poker podcasts that you can get if you ever decide to subscribe to CLP, which you can get a 25% discount for life on by using the link in the description below. But to address that comment, it is a very good way to look at it. I am not having success this year. I am getting my ass kicked. But my opponents, they are having very good years in a lot of spots. So that's not for nothing. No one you know who is a loyal vlog viewer, who I appreciate, writes in a lengthy comment, starting it out by saying Bugsy in the house, Slick in the house. And then he goes on to the point where I'm going to touch on, talking about, do you think that with poker conditions having changed as much as they have, that there's more of a market for mixed game action? He also says, yay for Walter.
You see what happens, Larry? You see what happens when you fuck a stranger there?
The answer to that question is maybe, because now, even in Reno, there is a mixed game that is developing, and it's once a week on Mondays. Now, I can never play on Mondays. If I could, I would probably try to jump in this occasionally, because I would love to be able to develop my mixed game skills from obviously not being much. Not to say I've never played them, but I have not played them very often. The majority of the time I spent playing them came pre-Black Friday on Full Tilt, but I would love to actually get better at them. The opportunity just rarely comes, but even having one a week like we now have in Reno is a step in that direction. So maybe that's becoming more of a thing, but at this point, I don't think there's going to be a ton of money there. And then finally, Apocalypse Promotions writes in, a 300 game in bowling is the pinnacle of perfection. Very few bowlers ever achieved this, and says your 300th poker vlog is also the pinnacle of perfection, saying that it takes 12 months a year dedication. We celebrate you. Here's to another 300. I do wonder how many poker vloggers out there have gotten there. I know Andrew and Brad certainly have. Rampage has probably gotten to like vlog 2000 by now, doing 3 a week or whatever he does. But yeah, I would certainly say there's not a million vloggers that have done 300. So I do really appreciate you saying that, but not as much as I appreciate those of you who have been with me from the start. And I know the majority of you are people who have never left a single comment on the channel, which is totally fine. I totally get that. But your loyal viewing is appreciated more than I can describe, because as a local broadcaster here in Reno who knew how to edit video and play poker, both reasonably well, but certainly not going to go down as the best in the world at either one, to be able to have 300 vlogs worth of success and to have people join me for all of them has been really the highlight of my career. And I certainly look to keep it going as long as I can. Appreciate that. We'll keep those comments coming in over the next couple of weeks and give that coin away. If you haven't already, hit those like and subscribe buttons. and we will see you back here for vlog 301.
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do, and now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. I just gotta get through, I just gotta get through. Cause I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. Sometimes I feel like all is lost, but I know it's not true. I wanna put up all my walls cause I'm not in the mood, but then I cut myself off from the rest of the room. I know that time can heal it all if you're patient, and soon it can all be worth.